Welcome to the Silicon Web Customers Guild presents inside the ICG Pat and Peggy Kennedy Memorial Archives webinar. We have the ICG Archives team here, and we're going to be talking about the archive process for the ICG and what that's all about. But first, I wanted to give a couple of introductory slides, then we'll introduce the webinar and our speakers. The Silicon Web Customers Guild has a webinar series that offers talks by speakers on topics related to costumes or costuming. They're free to Silicon Web members, and they may also be available to the greater costuming community on a space available basis. If you have suggestions for future speakers or topics, if you could send them to board@siwcustomers.org with the subject line webinar series, we'd appreciate it. We take suggestions and use those suggestions for future webinars. We want to acknowledge the International Costumers Guild Marty Gear Costuming Arts and Sciences Fund for providing a grant to get this webinar series started, and also the ICG for making its Zoom platform available to chapters and special interest groups. A couple of notes before we get going on Zoom. Please set and leave your video and audio controls on mute. Feel free to chat or react during the presentation in the chat window. There will be a Q&A period after the presentation. If you want to ask questions, type it into the chat window, and optionally, if you want to, label it Q&A. We may take a few questions during, but usually we'll wait until the end and then have a Q&A period where we can explore topics that weren't covered in the presentation. When the webinar is over, if you could please complete a brief survey on your experience, we appreciate it. Your feedback is valuable, and we use it to improve future webinars. Our talk today is the International Costumers Guild Pat and Peggy Kennedy Memorial Archives. It's the world's largest collection of photos, videos, paper ephemera, and physical artifacts of the costuming arts in relation to sci-fi fantasy conventions and also other events where costumes are worn. We're going to be talking about the work preserving the history of costuming, including recent projects, processes, equipment, software, how digital and physical collections are stored, and how they're made available to the costuming community. So I want to introduce our speakers. Leslie Johnson manages the gallery. She was responsible for implementing the current generation of the gallery software and also for managing the gallery and its content on a day-to-day basis. Bruce Mai is an associate archivist whose focus is on collecting and preserving media, including video and audio in both digital and analog formats. He also manages the ICG Archives YouTube channel and Facebook page, and many of you may have seen his work at halftime shows at conventions as well as the archive presents interesting topics and videos. Nora Mai is an associate archivist, and her focus is on digitizing historical costume photographs and other ephemera and making them available for use in the gallery as both collections and as exhibits. And Pierre Pettinger is the ICG archivist, and he has overall responsibility for administration of the ICG archives and its budget. And he also does projects related to the archive as well. So with that, take it away and let's hear about the archive.
Well, I get to start this show, guys, and I'm going to make a couple brief remarks and then let you get into the meat of things with the other associate archivists. Let me talk about, first of all, the early years. Prior to the early 1980s or so, there just weren't any organized attempts to archive the costuming community. Many people took photos, and rarely there was an organized, sometimes in an organized manner, but video or filming occurred, but again, not with any regularity or with any plan. In the early 80s, several individuals began to videotape masquerades more formally. Most prominently were Carl Mammy and John Fong, at least in the parts of the country that we knew. I'm sure there were others in other parts of the country that we've never heard of, and their work is also to be recommended. While occasionally a convention would contract with one of these gentlemen or another videographer, very often it was largely informal. Carl or John would set up a station, get permission, set up their cameras, and video the whole masquerade, but it was not technically formal. Carl also at this time started to collect photographs, as did a number of other of us. And it was about this time that a lot of masquerade directors started to uh, actually think about having official photographers, and which would take pictures of the contestants, usually in a controlled manner rather than just willy nilly. And we would often go and Carl and I and a couple other people would always try to make sure we got copies of those to be able to get them installed into the archives. Sandy and I became involved in masquerades in 1983. That's what Sandy's my wife, for those of you, few of you who would probably don't know. Since we are both librarian archivists by nature, we purchased as many of them, as I mentioned, as we could. And sometimes Sandy would take pictures when we were not actually competing, as she's a much better photographer than I am. So Carl eventually decided to set up what was eventually became known as the ICG archives. And unfortunately, for many years, the way to see the archives was to go to Carl's house, and that was in New Jersey. So a little bit inconvenient for those of us who weren't in that immediate area, but it was the only thing we had at that time. Keep in mind that this was pre-internet, not that the internet didn't exist, but that where a lot of us had easy access to it and it was easy to set things up. It was a lot more difficult, and so we had very little there available on the internet. By the time we got to 2005, Carl was starting to suffering from health issues, and so he transferred the archives mostly to me and Sandy. Since we had our own extensive collection, it seemed at the time the very natural sequence to do that. And so that became that our house is where you had to come if you wanted to look at the archives. It was shortly after this that Bruce and Nora became involved as associate or assistant archivists, and they had some of the context available so we could actually get a website up to start displaying all the photos that we had. They used a software, which, if I remember correctly, was called Gallery, and it was a pretty nice little bit of software. One of the great things about it was that it allowed us to set up a lot of custom fields for data. A lot of the photo sharing things were very basic. You know, you put it up, and that was about it. There might be a name on it, maybe, nothing else. We had since, again, being archivists, we thought a lot of data needed to be there to explain to people what they were looking at and to make available for people, those who were trying to do research for any projects they wanted to do, that information that they might need. And that's one of the things Gallery was great at, is allowing us to do all that. Unfortunately, the makers of Gallery eventually kind of let the software lapse. They stopped doing updates. We started having failures in the software. Links would break constantly that had to be recreated and sometimes couldn't be recreated. So from a number of years, the gallery literally went offline. We just could not maintain it to where it was usable. And so there was no gallery. For a number of years, we went around and about this. And that's where Leslie came into the picture. Because Leslie, who works for the National Archives, had some contacts and had some information, and she found a bit of software that's actually used by many professional museums for their collections, especially their online collections and exhibits. And so she got us set up with that software, and we got the new archives back up online, the new galleries back up online, and we have since been adding to it a great deal. And that's where we're sitting at this moment. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off, I believe, to Nora, who's going to give you a little bit of information on how we archive things, how we make up inventory lists, and things of this nature to keep track of the material that we have. Take it away, Nora.
Thank you, Pierre. So my primary focus ever since we've been working with the archives has been on photographic imagery. And we accept many different kinds of images. Obviously, we started based in pictures from science fiction masquerades from different conventions around the world, primarily, of course, the United States, but we try to branch out further than that. Since our initial collections of SF masquerade photos, we've also gotten into historical costumes and fashion shows. We're also interested in any other kind of costuming photos, to be honest. We have in the archives some collections of Middle Eastern dance costume photos. We have a large selection of old photos of mummers from Philadelphia. Bruce, can you close the front door, please? We have somebody outdoors is making some lot of noise, so Bruce is going to go close the door. So we are interested in pretty much all kinds of costumes, old Halloween costumes, new Halloween costumes, whatever, just anything in the creative arts of costuming. And we also accept different kinds of the static images, both photos and slides. So obviously we'll take actual hard copy photos, film. Most of it's digital now, but when we get hard copies, either of slides or photos, we then digitize them either by scanning ourselves in-house. I do have a flatbed scanner to my immediate left, as well as a slide scanner, which is it is a lab quality slide scanner. It's not the big fancy ones that the photo places use, but it's the next step down. So we like slides a lot, and slides give you beautiful images. So I actually invested in that myself. These are my personal equipment that I donate the use of to the ICG archives because my father was a big fan of slides. So for me, buying a slide scanner to get my own personal images preserved was a good thing to have. So then now that I have it in hand, I can use it for any kind of slides that I want, including the ICG archive slides. So we scan them in. Like I said, a lot of it is done here in-house, right here in my living room in St. Louis, Missouri. Larger collections, we have a service in town that does it for us. We have had a few people send us albums worth, a box with 6 albums of 300 photos a piece, and that would take way too much time to do here. So we extract them from the albums, we bring them to the service does them for us, and they digitize it and give us discs. So that's for things that are in large amounts, which is kind of nice. And they do a very good job, and they're not terribly expensive, but it is one of the things the ICG archives has budgeted for, so we can get those done for us. We've talked about where they're stored. They are stored in multiple places. Now, the physical photos or slides, once we are complete with the scanning process, those are then sent up to Pierre, either because he does visit here in St. Louis a couple times a year and he takes them up personally in his own vehicle. We have shipped a few times, but the actual physical photos and slides that we have in our possession are stored in their home along with the rest of the archives. The digital files we have in multiple places. We have a hard drive here to my left. They are also on my laptop. They are also on a cloud drive. We are in the process of duplicating all of the photo storage so that we have multiple copies in different parts of the country. Should there be any natural disasters of any kind, those will be preserved as well. So anything we get will be preserved somewhere. So we will have multiple redundancies, so we won't lose any of this stuff, because that's what's happening. Is a lot of this is things that as we get older, our families are not interested in our pictures and our slides, which you will find is true of personal pictures and slides. I have enormous stocks of other people's pictures in my house that I have picked up from estate sales or eBay or whatever, because I love these old images that you get from people's vacations or the things where everybody used to come to your house and see the slides from your vacation. No one does that anymore. It's all like, yeah, here's my pictures on my phone. But I find all these old images from real cameras to be very evocative. So I collect them myself personally. And nobody wants their own family's pictures anymore. So what we want to do is make sure that if you have anything of a costume photo nature, your family may or may not want those, even if it's a picture of you. And we're happy to give them a home because we want that history and we want to preserve that. And it is something that we desperately want to keep for us so that in the future, people will be able to see the whole body of our work and the progress of it, and even historical costuming as far back as photos go, which is well into the 1800s. So we've got a lot of that stuff. Just we wanted to have it. Currently, I don't have an exact number, and I need to do that, but I did not want to take hours and hours and hours out of my personal time to count them at the moment, but I will in the future. We have over 200,000 images in our possession, scanned images. And the gallery, which Leslie will be talking about more later, has less than 10% of that online. Approximately 25 to 30% of the images we have are actually inventoried. So as you can see, there is a lot of work yet to be done, and we will be working on that going further future. But what I wanted to show you is a little bit about how we do our inventory. Like I said, we get the pictures, we get them scanned either here personally or externally, and then we do something we call a spreadsheet, which I know you've all heard spreadsheets. We use Excel, it's not fancy. And we do inventory. And what I'm going to show you is the inventory for CostumeCon. It's divided by events primarily because that is how most people tend to ask us about, do we have a photo? We do get questions about, do you have a photo of someone? But we get questions about, do you have photos from X event? So we've done it primarily by X event. So this is the CostumeCon spreadsheet. And you can see in the first column is what we have as our inventory code. This was developed through a lot of work and group discussion. And while it looks odd and peculiar and ponderous, it is actually very informative to those of us who know what this inventory code means. The first three letters you see there is a code that tells you what the event is. In our instance, CCN is CostumeCon. Then you have the year, 4-digit code for year. And then that second, in the top line there, line 190, you'll see 02. 02 means it's a historical masquerade event. 006 following that means it is the 6th costume that we have a record of for the historical masquerade at that event. 008 means it is the 8th photo of the 6th costume of that event at that convention. So I can tell you what this is. Now, the rest of the spreadsheet gives you details about what that code is going to actually mean. You've got the event column, which tells you what event you're at. This happens to be the spreadsheet page for CostumeCon 39, just this year, actually, 2023. As you can see on the tabs on the bottom, we go back all the way to CC1. So we do have some photos from that far back. This one, we have the location, San Jose, California. The event year, which is actually the event dates. And event type, here we have in this section, historical masquerade. Up here we have science fiction masquerade. We also have codes for fashion shows, as in future fashion shows or single patterns. We have hall costumes. There's codes for any number of different types of photos and different types of events. So we have a full spreadsheet of those different types of things. As you can see, we do costume number. That is the first costume we have for that event, which is not always in entry order. In this case, it is in entry order because that is how we received them, and we like it that way. But if we receive them in a kind of a haphazard fashion, we may not have a full events photo. So it's whatever the first costume we received is and how many photos. So for photo number 1 in this section of the Morrigan, Colors of a Goddess, there were 6 photos we have. It was entry number 2 in that particular event. The division it was in was open. The title, The Morrigan, Colors of a Goddess, and the subject, in this case, Jacqueline M. Ward. We try to get people's real names. Sometimes we have both their real name and their stage name, whatever name they choose to give us. We also have in the photographer's name, who took that photo, and whether or not they are official photographers. Sometimes we'll have information about who the costume was made by, designed by, because sometimes that's not the same as who is in the actual photo, and who the photo was donated by. In this case, these photos were donated by John Wardale himself so that we could see them. And then over here we have a notes column. You never know what you're going to see in notes column. It could be from the 1939 Flash Gordon movie, or such and such was also competed at such and such other event, which will then cross post to another event. We also have the presentation awards, workmanship awards, and other awards column. For many of these spreadsheets, all the way over to the right where you really can't see it right now, there might be a column for the original photographer's file, or whoever donated it, they have their own file system. They may have their file number as well. So we've got multiple cross indications, which then can be distilled down to our particular inventory code. So as you can see, these can get complex and digging really deep into the data. And the reason we have them done specifically this way is that on the gallery software, which Leslie will talk to you about, it can pull the data from these fields. It can be directly mapped from these fields to fields within the gallery online, so that you will get all the data we have. And that's why we try to save it all. Costume cons, we're very lucky. One of the things we do encourage conventions to give us is run orders and award orders, whatever they've got from their various competitions. We usually get the full Monty from a costume con. We'll get the titles, we'll get the subjects, we'll get all the awards, all that information. So for costume con, the sheets are usually very, very full, which is why I'm showing you this one. The next fullest we get is Worldcon, which is also very in-depth. And a local convention, which some of you have heard of if you're in the St. Louis area, called Archon. And that one we obviously have a lot of information from and a lot of photos from, because we go every year and we at least take our own photos, if not get the official photos, which we're also getting in and online. But until it's actually on a spreadsheet with this inventory number, we can't really put it on the gallery. The old gallery software we could, because it was all a manual add anyway. None of it was loaded like this is done. So we could just get in there and manually put things in without having an inventory number. But for this software, it's actually a better idea to have it inventoried before you do it, and you kind of have to in order to get it to load right. So I'm going to stop showing you my nerdy business. So like I said, we're willing to take almost everything, specifically in areas we don't have a lot of coverages. We were talking about this earlier before the Zoom started, that there are areas of this country that we don't get as much out of the United States as we would love to have. We would take anything from out of the United States. Within the United States itself, we are very heavy on the Midwest, because that's where we live. World cons, costume cons. New England, pretty heavy. We got a sizable chunk now from like Seattle area. And of course, we would love more because Seattle's only one place in the Northwest. We have some reasonable size collections from California, and we have almost nothing from the South and Texas and the Southwest, aside from the bits. I mean, California is technically not the Southwest, or is it? I'm not positive. But like Arizona, Nevada, those places, we don't get a ton from there. So we would love to be able to get more things from there. And yes, I'm asking for more things to inventory when I don't have it all done even now. But if I have it in my hands and it is digitized and we have it saved, it can be inventoried as we go along. We want the information. We don't want to lose it. Recently, we've been working on some very large collections, and I think Bruce has more information about that. But we have one gentleman in the Washington area who has been sending us albums upon albums upon albums of Westercons and other things in his area. And we have a few thousand pictures from CC9 that should be going up relatively soon onto the gallery, Costume Con 9. Those will be really great to see. And it's fun to watch his photo skill progress as he got better cameras and more experience with them. He's a very good photographer, very prolific photographer, and those will be nice to have once we get those up. I am working on those currently. And any number of other, and that, by the way, the gentleman's name is Jack Krolak. If you know him up in that area, he's been donating quite a bit of his personal collection to us. How to donate. A lot of people ask, how do I donate, or how do I get my friend to donate? Well, how you get your friend to donate. It's up to you. How much pressure you can put on your friends. That's as much as I can probably put on my friends. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we would certainly appreciate your efforts. But if you want to donate, really, if you just contact us at the ICG archivist at ICG at costume.org. You can find us on the ICG archive page on the gallery. You can also find the link in the Facebook page for the gallery. And contact us, drop us a note, and we will let you know how to get stuff to us. We will be happy to take almost anything. One thing we do provide, quote unquote, provide, is a scanning service, if you will. If you send us your photos, what we're going to do is get them scanned, obviously, because what we want is digital photos. And if you want your photos returned to you, we'll be happy to return them to you, and they will be returned to you with a disc of your photos scanned, so that you can then pop that in your computer or your TV or whatever, and you can look at your photos, which you have not looked at in years because they're all stuck in albums, and I know you haven't. And you'll be able to look at them and show them to your friends and say, this is what I did, and this was a lot of fun. So you'll be able to see them again. Now, the alternative is if you want to send us the photos and you don't want them back, we'll give them to Pierre to put in his house. And we will still send you a disc of your photos scanned once they're completed. And so you will have copies of your photos, and they will take up a lot less room in your house. Sounds like a good deal, right? So contact us either through the Facebook page or email us, and we will be absolutely happy to have your stuff. Even if it is something we maybe have seen before, you might have a different angle, you might have a different photo. Certainly those of us who costume collect more pictures of ourselves than other people. So you're going to have additional views of your costumes that we have not seen before. And that is something we really, really want. So have I blathered enough about nonsense? I probably have. So our next speaker is going to be Bruce, who's about 12 feet north of me. And he's going to talk about mostly video, but I don't really know what he's going to talk about because he's his own person and he's his own notes. So thanks for listening to my nerd talk.
Hello. Just a couple of historical notes, I would say, about how and why Nora wound up helping Pierre and Sandy with the archives is probably some of you might know who know them for a long time. They used to haul around, what, 10, 11, 12 boxes of albums of photos everywhere they went. And Nora and I had only been into costuming for like a few years after we had gotten married. And so the first time that we met them, they brought all this stuff along. We're just like, holy crap, we've never seen this much stuff in one place. So that really inspired us. So, and of course, as we knew more about the community, we're more and more interested in seeing what other people were doing in other parts of the country. And we started talking with Carl and being aware of his work with the archives. And then when Carl said he just couldn't do it anymore, I mean, he was getting overwhelmed, and B, his health was not the greatest. We jumped right in and told Pierre that we'd be more than happy to give him a hand. So as it's sort of evolved, we've kind of worked with kind of taking our own kind of specialties, if you will. And we've had Leslie, of course, join us and giving some absolutely invaluable advice about archiving and doing stuff online, which we couldn't have done if we didn't have her here. So it's nice to have the vice president of the ICG helping us. Nora had mentioned some of the collections that we've gotten, mentioned the one gentleman from Washington. That's some of what I've been trying to do, is find these people that I was aware of who did have these large collections way back in 1990, 92, 91. Drew Sanders had a very large collection that he was showing at the Worldcon that year in Chicago. And I finally tracked him down via Facebook many years later, and he generously donated those to the archives, and I'm still working on those. Our priority was Worldcons, but he has a lot of stuff from other West Coast regional conventions, so those will be a nice addition. And that totals about 900 photos, I think. Of course, I could be thinking of just the Worldcon photos. I have to check that. But anyway, we also received the photos from the Kennedy collection. So that gives us a nice range of people from the 1960s. The Connells have given us some nice stuff. Let's see who else we have. Rusty Daw gave us his collection relatively recently. It has a great amount of stuff from the West Coast from the 80s. And I've been in contact with Astrid Anderson, and she generously gave us copies of her mother's photos. And though there were a few, they were a great collection from the 50s and 60s that we didn't have before. So anyway, so like I said, we're concentrating our own kind of interests. My interest has been in video. It's always interesting to actually see people present their costumes, and not just see them and see how they were used, how were they made, how they moved, how they interacted with the audience. So Carl was kind of ahead of his time. He knew that he needed to preserve these videos because he was thinking there may not be any other record. So he started he was traveling around all the country and collecting these videos. And he was aware that technology was coming to a point where they could be digitized, but it was an overwhelming task to try to preserve and digitize both photos and videos. So I figured, well, this is where I can help because I had my own interest in it. Once we were able to get a hold of the videos in his collection, plus we had our own collection and the Pettinger collection, it was kind of a race against time because the videotapes were slowly starting to degrade. Unfortunately, there was a time in the early 1990s when the quality of videotapes was very inferior. And if any of you have any masquerade tapes from that time period, you know what I'm talking about if you've actually looked at them. And amazingly enough, the ones in the 1980s have still held up better than the ones in most of the 90s for whatever reasons. I guess because in the 90s, the videotapes were probably made by maybe one or two manufacturers, and nobody expected them to last, you know. So like I said, it's a race against time to digitize things. Fortunately, the price of technology was coming down, and I managed to get pretty much all videotapes that we know about that are existent done by sometime in the first decade, maybe the first half decade of the 21st century, second half of anyway, you know what I mean. So everything at this point is pretty much digitized. My process is, just go through it quickly, is when I had these videotapes, I would make sure there were no problems with the videotapes. It turns out that when you digitize this stuff, the audio frequently gets out of sync with the video. So I had to sit there and digitally resync the audio with the video. And you're sitting there trying to I'm still working. As a matter of fact, I'm still doing that. I just recently got the videos from John Vengrowski for CostumeCon 11, which nobody had for years and years and years. So he finally turned those over to us, and I'm going through those right now with the multiple cameras and having to resync all those videos and then produce a multi-camera presentation of the masquerades. And those tapes have held up relatively well because they use relatively good quality videotapes. So anyway, once I've done that, editing is things like break out individual subjects, such as say best presentations, aliens, creatures, furries. I mean, there's like 30, 40 different ones. And so far, I think I have about maybe 3,000 clips in total. But I've still got maybe 200 videos, both that are either on DVD, in which case I don't have to worry about those necessarily rotting quite so much as videotape, or things that I've downloaded off the net and breaking those into clips as well. So that's an ongoing project for me. Not leaving well enough alone, I've taken upon myself to do things like the memorial that we have at CostumeCon. It was something I thought about that I wanted it's my own effort to try to bring a sense of community that maybe we didn't have because we're all spread across the United States. Now, granted, it's better now than it used to be because we have things like Facebook, but at the time, it was really the only place that you could maybe celebrate that person's memory in person with a bunch of your friends. So that's been going on since I believe 2009, and I work on a presentation every year. It's shown at, sorry, what? Once she makes me do it. Yes, sometimes I put it off. But it premieres at Costume Con halftime, and then it goes up on the YouTube channel, which I can talk about in just a moment. So, and then in addition to that, I've done halftime entertainments for just, for people to watch, so they're not just sitting around waiting for judges to finish their decisions. I've also produced some halftime shows for Worldcon, which I thought was pretty cool, and gave the ICG some nice exposure and showing them what we do and trying to preserve the images of costuming, which is an integral part still of Worldcon. Not leaving well enough alone, so we have the YouTube channel where I put the memorials up, but I also do special retrospectives of artists, retrospectives of conventions, and there'll be some themed stuff as well. So some of that'll be at Costume Con, some of that'll be online. We also use the videos in panels that we do. We've done a number of presentations at conventions where we've been able to travel to, or if we've been guests of. Continue to produce more and more of them as we go along. We have lots of ideas. It's just a matter of being able to take the time to maybe make some more benefits for ICG chapters. We also have the ICG. Did you mention the ICG Gallery page, Facebook page?
On your thing, you can talk about it.
Okay, I can talk about it. Right. There is, on Facebook, we have the International Customers Gallery. That's where we make announcements about things that are either on the gallery that have been put up or things that are on the YouTube channel. So it's a good way to get the word out to people who are interested in seeing what we're doing. We have over 1,000 followers, so that's pretty nice. Let's see. I did mention the panels. So we have the road show as well, where we actually will take a 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hour thing where we'll just show random video that we have in the archives that otherwise people wouldn't get to see. So, if there's something that of interest, that if we're at a convention that you would like to see, we now have all the video, all the videos one way or the other digitized, so we can bring things to you. Maybe not everything that's on the DVDs yet, but like I said, I've got like 3,000 clips of various and sundry subjects. Trying to think if there's anything else. That's pretty much it. Mentioned the collections. Anything else? Told you about the storage. Just very quickly, the way we were storing videos, we have these large hard drives. We have a hard drive for the video and a master hard drive for the photos. And we've been making redundant copies for Pierre to hold where he is. So we basically have 2 copies of the archive now. We have one in Lincoln and one here in St. Louis. And then, of course, as we go along, we will be having at least part of those archives online, which is what Leslie is taking care of. All the DVDs, videotapes, all wind up at Pierre's house because he's got the bigger house. So, but like I said, we have all the digital stuff here, and it's just kind of an ongoing project that we're going to be working on for years. And I forget who it was raising. Maybe it was Nora. It's like, it's one thing we have to worry about is who's coming after us. So that's the way things are working right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Leslie now.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. I am going to do the thing that we try to never ever do, or set of live demos. I'm going to start with the super, super nerdy part of this. It's already been discussed that we had a system, a piece of software that was called Gallery, that we had, hosted on a server. It ran for many years. It had a lot of great functionality. But when that system died, it really died. Luckily, and this was actually many thanks to Phil, Phil had actually had a backup and actually an export of the entire database structure. He also had copies of the images that were on the server. That's an important distinction, and I'll get to that. So we were able to get a sense of what metadata had already been in the gallery, how many images were there, what they were, so that we had sort of a benchmark to work against as we started building a new system. The system that Phil and I chose, and Phil says that I did it. Phil was also a very active part of this as the webmaster for the ICG, as well as the chair of the technical committee for the ICG, is a piece of software called Omeka. And in particular, we use the version called Omeka Classic. Omeka is an open source project. The project is housed at George Mason University in Virginia, in their Center for Digital Humanities. It is a very highly used, very well supported piece of software that still has very, very active development, expansion, extension, conversations, everything you could want from a piece of archival software. And I call it a piece of archival software because that's really what it is designed for. The gallery system was originally designed for practicing photographers. So it was a great system for the inventory of images, but what it wasn't was a system that could support archival practices. The use of standardized metadata, the creation of exhibits, applying certain types of vocabulary. So that's one of the reasons that Omeka is a great tool for us, because it can actually do these things and many more things we haven't even started with. So I'm giving you just a sense here of the dashboard for the system. We currently have, as Nora mentioned, we have 16,500 images in. We do tag the images. We have 18 individual plugins added to the system, added functionality. We can control all of the plugins, including some custom plugins for how we do exhibits or how we edit metadata. We can apply themes. There's a large number of themes that are available. We happen to like this particular theme and we did a few extensions to it. We can do the settings. We have the 16,513 items. We have a concept of collections. This was also something that we had in the original gallery software. So every item that is in the gallery is actually associated with a collection. Some of these you may see here on the screen. They're not live yet because they're things that we're working on. Like I have a test collection where I test some things, but you can see, the Drew Sanders collection that Bruce mentioned, Costume Con, Steamposium, San Diego Comic Con, Nosfix, Westercons, LostCons, Aquacons, Equicons from the 1970s. So you can see there's a large collection of events that we have the collections for, but also some collections by the person who was either the photographer or the donor, such as a large collection that we have from Bijo and John Trimble, or things that came from Carol and Mike Resnick, as well as I have my own collection in there. I also have Lisa Ashton's collection in there since I have access to that. We do use standardized metadata, but we had to extend it. So for anybody here that's in the nerdy library community, you'll be familiar with the concept of Dublin Core. That is a core set of metadata elements or fields that you use to actually describe things like title, creator, date. Extended Dublin core allows you to add some more details to those elements, but we are a very specialized community. And the first time that I started working with the system, I tried to map in and jam in all of our very specialized concepts into qualified Dublin core. That did not work for us. We could not jam all of our things into Dublin core. So one of the great things about this system is that it allows you to create categories of objects. It already has many of these already set. So moving image, oral history, websites, events, email, software. So we created an extended metadata set for costume images. So while we are using the regular qualified Dublin core for things like title, creator, date, location, we really needed to make use of these extended fields for things like costume type, the event type, entry numbers, divisions, made by, the awards, photographers, captions. These were all concepts that were very specific to our types of images and our types of holdings and collections. So this is a great piece of software for this because it allowed me to use the community standard as well as extend the community standard and map it to some standards that have been developing in the archival and visual resources community for the metadata and description of costumes. But even so, we needed more even than Costume Core has, because we're actually tracking competitions, not just images of theatrical or stage or screen costumes. We do get to build, this has a built-in capability of creating exhibits. I'll show some of these live in a little bit. But it gives you the idea and way to set up an exhibit, to set and put it into multiple parts, link images in, add additional metadata to it. And we have done a lot of them around World Cons. We've been making our way backwards with the World Cons from the most recent. But we have a lot of thematic ones that we're starting in as well. I noticed Carol Parker asked in the chat about Snow Queens. Oh yes, we do have an exhibit on Snow Queens because pretty much every one of us has been a Snow Queen at some point, including me. So there is actually an exhibit in the gallery having to do with snow, ice, and winter. We have spring and summer, and I've started to pull things together for one on fall and harvest. So we're going to get our way through the seasons as well. We do have, even though there is another image archive, and this is something that we often have to clarify. There is a Costume Con image archive, and the archivist for that collection is Betsy Marks. And that collection is official photography from Costume Cons and official video, if they have it, of Costume Cons. And so that is a very specific Costume Con archive. We do have some of the same photos here in the ICG archives and in the gallery, but we have a much wider range also of other materials. For example, we built an exhibit around Costume Con 1, the very first Costume Con. I was not there. I started going at Costume Con 2 in San Diego, but we have a collection of images that came from Drew Sanders, from Sally Fink. So we have some of the early photos of that first Costume Con in 1983. Most of the other things I don't need to show you. It's all admin sort of stuff, how we build our vocabularies, how we do our batch uploading. Because the great thing about this is that you can also do batch uploading. So Nora showed you one of her spreadsheets. I can take her spreadsheet, transform it into a CSV, comma delimited text file, and I can upload those as long as they have the links to the images and the images all in bulk actions. And so that's actually a lot of what I do is when Pierre and Bruce and Nora say they have sets of things that are ready to go, I can grab the images, and I can grab the spreadsheet and I can load them into the system, add in tags having to do with events and dates, and start building exhibits. This does take some time. I will say I'm one person and I still have a full-time job. Someone mentioned I work for the National Archives. I'm the Director of Digital Preservation for the U.S. National Archives, and they still expect me to actually work every day. Who knows why? But this is a lot of what I could bring to this, is that this is actually what I do in my daily work. But because I do have that work, it means that, you know, I can't always every single day be loading things into the collection. So I'm going to stop sharing this part, and I am going to now go into the gallery itself. There we are. So this is the gallery as it runs on the Omeka software. If anybody wants to know any of the details about the behind the scenes of the software, it is primarily Python and PHP on top of a MySQL database. The system is actually hosted by a company called Reclaim, which has as one of their lines of business hosting this particular software for archives and collections and small institutions and small museums that don't want to run it themselves. So we get phenomenal support from Reclaim. I recommend them as a host for any sort of hosted materials. So they actually keep this up to date for us. They do all the patching. They do all the updated installations for us. The only thing that I need to do is keep up to date on the plugins that we put in. We run that on Reclaim, but all of our image storage for the collection is actually in Amazon Web Services. I have an S3 bucket in Amazon, and we actually, the load process will put all the metadata, all the text, all the descriptions into the system database and copies all of the images into our buckets on Amazon S3. Because this is a hosted system, they have some limits. We will go beyond those limits very, very quickly, which is why we went to the much more extensible and frankly more cost-effective Amazon S3 storage for the images. So, you know, it's a great system and it's very extensible and it's very well supported, which makes it a great choice for us. I want to go back to one thing that I mentioned a little while ago. I thanked, you know, Phil, many kudos to Phil for actually having a backup and the images. The thing about the images that we had was they were the images that were in the system. And because we started that work a very long time ago, the images had actually been reduced in size as part of the upload for display on the internet, because we were doing this at an early time when storage was at a premium. And so a lot of them were downscaled. So a lot of those images were actually very, very small. So we did end up going back to the original digitized images that Nora and Bruce had, and we went ahead and loaded the new versions of the images. But if I hadn't had the database from Phil, I wouldn't know what we had and what we needed to match it to. So this is the Pat and Peggy Kennedy Memorial Archive. One of the things that I saw in the chat was a question about who were Pat and Peggy Kennedy. So we talk a little bit about Pat and Peggy, and we link to the pages that are on the ICG website that give you some information about them and their history and sort of how it came to be named for them. We have a great FAQ here. At the time, a couple of years ago when we went live, we said over 100,000. It's certainly now over 200,000. What the focus is, how you can work with us, how you can donate to us. If you have corrections about information, and, you know, as Nora and Pierre and Bruce said, sometimes we know a lot about who's in an image of a costume, and sometimes we don't even know the title, the character, or who is wearing it. So if you can give us information about something that's in there or a correction, something we've gotten wrong, please go ahead and let us know, and they can get that information to me and I can upload that and update that in the system. So We do have also information about the ICG. We want to make sure everybody knows what the ICG is and how we are affiliated with them. So we have collections. These are some of the collections by convention. So we have collections by convention. As we said, we've put a lot of time into Worldcon, but we're also working on some of the smaller cons and some of the cons that we have less coverage of, like WesterCon. That used to be my home con, along with BayCon when I was in California. So you can go through these and browse by collection. We also have some what we call the contributed collection. So things that came from Denise, Nora, me, Judy and Ron Miller, Carol and Mike Resnick, Drew, B. Joe and John. One of the areas that I find really important to work on is while we've been working from the most recent back on Worldcons, we're also trying to spend a lot of time getting loaded in the older images. So the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I find it hard to call the 70s old because that's when I was in high school, but it is old. And while we are still here and we still remember it, we want to continue to get more and more of those images in to build up that comprehensive history in the system. So I will just go into mine. So mine has images that go back to my very first competition in 1979 when I was an elf. Very exciting. I was an elf at I see Ellie Farrell at the 1979 MythCon, where I believe I may have met Ellie Farrell for the first time. And this is a digitized image of a really, really horrible photo that was taken on a really, really poor quality camera, but it's the only photo I have. And it has, as time has passed on, become pink and unfocused, and it has that weird grainy texture. So, we have 16,000 images, but also much better ones. So, oh, there we go. It's thinking for a second. There's two of us in the house right now, and we are actually doing two different things. So I mentioned the exhibits. Let me go to, say, the exhibit for Costume Con 1. And this has a little bit of information. We could add more about the first Costume Con. And it has, for example, what images we have. We don't have all of them for the very first Future Fashion Show. This is the first that was ever held in 1983. And you'll recognize some of the people here. Astrid Anderson, Sally Fink, Kathy Sanders Bushman, Karen Turner, Karen Schnabeld, there's Rusty Daw, who we were mentioning, Kelly Turner, the late Kelly Turner, John Trimble, Laura Trimble. So, names that we all know from the very first science fiction and fantasy masquerade there at that first. So Peggy Kennedy, Larry Barnes, Adrian Martine Barnes, Drew Sanders, Kathy Pillsbury, the late Marty Gear, the historical masquerade, what images we have from that, including Victoria Ridnour and Adrian Butterfield, and also the information that we have about the committee. So who were the chairs, who were the advisors, the guests, and who were the various staff members for the con. We would like to do more of these. As Pierre has been cataloging the World Cons, he's been collecting as much information as he can about the staff of the World Cons so that we can add more and more of that information in. We also have things like the costumes and costumers of the 1960s. One of my favorite parts of this exhibit is notable authors in costume. So there's Bob Aspirin, there's Lynn Carter, there's Marion Zimmer Bradley, there's David Gerald, there's Dick Lupoff, there's Chelsea Quinn Yarborough, there's E.E. Doc Smith as not one of his own characters, but one of C.L. Moore's characters. There's Larry Niven as Implosion in a Time Machine. So it's really, really great to be able to show these and to be able to, make this history available in a way that's really, really accessible online. I'll actually bring up Snow, Ice, and Winter for Carol Parker since she was asking about this. So Snow Queens, and more Snow Queens. So that's really, the gist of this. I could go on about this for hours talking about the technology, but I shouldn't. But I will make a plug for all of us that we are indeed looking for more participation, more volunteers to work with us, not only on the inventory and cataloging, but we could start bringing more people in to work with me on getting the materials loaded into the system. I'd love to have some additional assistance with that because I don't always have the time that I should for it. But, I'm really excited to be doing this. And I think now I can stop sharing and we can answer questions. I see Tina says, you've never been a snow queen. So I see Phil asks, can Omeka store and display things like masquerade run lists and award lists? Absolutely. I mean, it can definitely store them. And we could do it a couple of ways. There is obviously an item type in Omeka for texts, for things like, plain text and, Word or Word Perfect. What I haven't done is what you're suggesting, which is tie the images into the long texts, but I can take that as an action and look at that. We've also talked about, doing exhibits that actually link to the videos on the YouTube channel, as a way to, do that. So that's definitely one of the things that we can. Ooh,
Something,
Ellie says she's got MythCon slides. That would
something
be
I was going
great.
to mention, Leslie, you're talking about the long text is another side project among other things we have is the oral history, getting people's stories about how they created their costumes and or any experiences they have. And we have the capability, I think right now already, a field on Omeka called Notes, where we can take the text of these stories and plug it in there so that people can read that. I believe at some point or another, we'll also have the capability for people to, well, I don't know, maybe not. I was going to say about adding their own stories, but maybe that probably is way down the line yet.
The functionality exists for it. And I'm going to just say, I'm always a little wary about opening things up a lot
Right.
because, anybody can edit anything. That could cause some grief for us down the road. But it does have the ability to let people create accounts through the web interface. And we could certainly start, working with some people who we know have oral histories that we want to share and have them be able to edit and enter their own.
But speaking of oral histories, even before we have the capability of putting it with the gallery and with the photos, we would love to have people's oral histories, any notes, memories, whatever about their costumes or costuming or other people's costumes or events they have gone to. So if you have memories about any of the history, your own personal or a world con you went to, or someone you met at a costume con, or your first time on stage or whatever, we would love to collect those stories as well. We don't have someone dedicated to that in the team yet, but it is something we have accumulated a very few personal memoir type of things from some people. So we would really love that kind of information. If anybody feels like they want to send their own memories or they feel like collecting memories from other people they know, we would love to have that kind of input.
Yeah, I see Carol's comment. So Carol, there is a field called subject, and that is the field that includes the names of the people who are in the photograph. And as Nora mentioned earlier, we don't always know if those are the people who made it or designed it. So if you're looking for a person, an image of a particular person in the search which I didn't show, I will actually quickly, because
So people can find themselves.
yeah, so people can find themselves. You can search for simple words, or you can search by fields if you're looking for that. you want to look for a subject, and contains always works best. So I will just search my own name as I do, and search, 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 think, think, think. And it came up with 131 images where I am one of the people in the photograph. So I can see things from costume cons, from Tesla Con, to a picture of me in my own living room, because that's the only picture I have of myself in that costume. Things going back, to the 80s. So that field, the subject field, is the best field to search on.
So I see that Philip asked about, do we actively collect costume documentation? Again, not at this point, but I believe it is something we've always had an interest in accumulating, both physically and scanning it into a digital form so it would be referable. So that's another thing where it would be nice to have another team member who specifically was interested in the documentation, and perhaps they could make that their focus. We do have a complete run in the archives of the old costume appas, which are, because they are content specific to the people who wrote them, not publicly available, but we do have all of the costume appas that were ever put out. I believe we have most of the old newsletter for the ICG and things like that, as far as like actual paper ephemera. So we have much of that, and some of it's not fully scanned yet, but we do have that in our archives. So it's not just the images, although of course we all love looking at the pictures and the videos, and that's a lot more compelling to look at. But we do also have a lot of text sort of info. Pierre could probably tell you more about what we've got, boxes of text stuff.
That's pretty much it. Real quick, Bruce, Catherine Drays was mentioning that you had mentioned the the YouTube channel, but didn't have a chance to get back to it. Do you want to maybe address some information about what we have there?
Okay. Like and that's something I should have thought of. I probably could have shared there. Yeah, like I said, it's most of the stuff that I've produced, both for half times and for YouTube alone sometimes, but both venues usually get to see these videos one way or the other. They have the all the memorials are up there that have ever been on there, except perhaps the first year, because at the time I was using copyrighted music. That can be another subject and go off into for a moment, but the memorials are there. There are also some features. We have a feature on Kathy Bushman and then her work. I also have features on just themes. Some of them are promos, basically, for the halftime shows at Costume Con halftimes. I think that's essentially it. I don't think I have any more information on that.
Bruce, let me show something real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to show you guys.
Well,
Real quick,
go ahead.
Phil, and I can address part of this. Leslie can jump in if she would like. Phil put in the question about what are the issues about displaying videos, not destroying. But anyway,
we can talk about
the main issue about displaying video is we run into the rights issue. Almost a lot of the videos, the costume presentations are done with music that is copyrighted. When they are shown at the individual event, the conventions usually, hopefully, and in most cases do, pay for what's called an ASCAP and a BMI license, which allows us to use that music. The problem is that those licenses that they buy are for the immediate display at the event. They don't buy one for exhibition or putting onto or for broadcast, which would be what on the internet would deal with. The reason they don't is because it's another order of magnitude or more up in cost to pay for such a license. So that is why we can't put them up unless somebody that's won the lottery would like to come in and pay the ASCAP and BMI fees to let us. We'd be more than happy to take that and put them up.
It should be mentioned, though, this is one of the things I've been mulling in the back of my head. There are a lot of presentations that do not have copyrighted music. And
those we could
I have
certainly
every
do.
intention of putting some of that stuff on there. There's
Right.
a number of things
that we could certainly do.
Yeah, there's a number of things you can do with YouTube now where you
Right.
could do those shorts. Nora says she's got the YouTube channel pulled up, so let's take a look. And there it is. And we have playlists. I think there's like 3 playlists there. Yep, we've got the memorials. We got the look backs. Those are retrospectives of past conventions. Some of them are slideshows. Some are actually video clips. Those are the ones that have typically non-copyrighted music over, but at least you can see the people presenting their costumes on stage. There's a lot of other things we could do. There's also the music videos that I do. There's been a few that I've produced, just like the steampunk one that the St. Louis Costumers Guild did. That was a lot of fun. That was strictly a slideshow. Something before I forget that I did want to mention, talked about the Facebook page earlier. Something else that we do on there is I've been writing the history of convention costuming. I've started 1939 and I'm all the way up to like 1966. What I did is I just decided I want to research this. And the way to research this was finding all the old fanzines that I could. And fortunately, there was a place in Iowa that had the Rusty Hevlin collection, plus one other fan who collected all these fanzines. And in the early days, a lot of times they did do reports about the masquerade and the people who participated in. So I've been starting on that. I've been working on that for 2-3 years now. That's the last one right there, as a matter of fact. The more photos we have, the more I can point to, say, that year and say, here's what was going on. One of the things I do try to do, though, is if I'm aware of other collections like either fanac.org or the one that a lot of people keep rediscovering is the J.K. Klein collection from out of California, which is all 1960s black and white photos. They're wonderful. I try to refer to those so you can actually see. I have the list of the winners of the masquerade. You can see the actual costumes that were made and who wore them. So that's been a lot of fun. And I have lots of years to go, but I also have these side features that I want to do about specific costumers or events or significant things in costuming, like the first cosplay video, which, by the way, we also collect for the archives as well. Anybody else want to take over there, or we got other questions? What do we have?
Yeah, I see Jennifer's asked about a presentation that we can make it available to ICG members who could then give the presentation when none of us are present.
That is
We
something we've talked about.
we do have a PowerPoint deck that we used at this year's Costume Con that was something about the history of the gallery and the collection, but also has images. We included images from the 50s, 60s, and 70s in that because I always like to surprise people by showing them that costuming existed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we could talk about making a version of that available if people are interested. If you're going to a con that none of us are going to be going to, you can write to the email address and ask us, and we might be able to make it available to you.
Give us a lot of lead time.
Yep.
But yeah, people have requested before that something like the Worldcon halftimes, things of that nature, they've wanted to have that, or individual costumers have requested that if we have some photos of them that maybe they don't have of themselves. That's always something that if you are missing a photo of yourself in costume, you're looking for one, write us. We might have it. Maybe somebody took a picture of you at some point that you didn't even know, and you might show up there. But yeah, we've actually talked about maybe perhaps making some sort of presentation available so the chapters could take it to their individual cons. And if they have a table, or if they have like a laptop they can just set up, something like that. And that's something we can think about here for the next year, maybe. Something else. Archive Con. We want to talk about that for a moment?
Oh, we
Well,
should.
A couple of years ago, when we were all stuck at home because of the pandemic, we decided that we wanted to get out of the house and do something that was productive. So we met in the middle of Ohio in a nice little hotel, and we had our first Archive Con. and it was the Pettingers and Leslie and Bruce and I, and we talked about what we wanted to do going forward. That was right before the gallery was, or was it right after the gallery went live? I can't remember if it was before or after.
It was
Right
just,
after,
it
I
was
think.
as it
It
was
was just
going
before,
live.
I
Pretty
think,
much as it
yeah.
was going live. And so we got together to finalize our thoughts on it and get it so it could go live onto the web so everyone could see it. We repeated that about a year later, and we had a couple more people join us and add in some more information and more fun. We only spent like a day and a half there, but it was good to get together face to face to actually discuss things. And since no one was going anywhere, because it was a very strange time to travel across the country by car, but there was very little people out there and not getting in our way, so it was a good time to do it. We have discussed actually doing this occasionally, just and having other people meet us there and learn how we do this, and maybe learn how to do inventory and become assistants and help us out with the tons of things we have to do. So if people are interested, we will probably do it again, maybe next summer. And if you're interested in maybe meeting up with us and seeing how we nerd out completely in the middle of Ohio, and we do pick the middle of Ohio because it's about halfway between Leslie and us. The Pettingers have to drive a bit farther, but that's the
We like to
price you
drive,
pay
so.
for living in Nebraska. So there you go. But if you're interested in joining us, we'd be certainly happy to have other people. Plus, it's always nice to see people in between seeing them at the conventions. So that's what we did. Anything else?
Yeah, Carol asks about library sciences students. We've had a couple express interest over the last few years, but one thing I will say, as someone who knows a lot of people who have been in library and information management programs, you don't have as much time for outside work as you think you're going to have. So we haven't actually had but one actually really volunteer any potential time, but we're definitely open to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can take an awful lot of time.
And a lot of it becomes a passion.
Yeah.
It's just, why did Carl start collecting? Because he liked the videos, he wanted people to see them, he wanted to be preserved. Why did Pierre and Sandy start doing it? Why did we jump into it? It's something that, for whatever reason, we feel like sacrificing huge chunks of our personal time, as
And
did
money.
Leslie, and money. As I said earlier, some of the equipment I use here at home is my personal equipment, and that's fine. I mean, it's something that, sure, I would pay $1,000 for a slide scanner. If I pay $1,000 for a slide scanner just for myself, yeah, I'd probably do it anyway because I'm that passionate about photography. But the fact that I can also use it to assist with the ICG archives, to me, is a bonus to owning the equipment anyway. It's one of those things like, I didn't just buy it for me, I'm also using it for a good reason. So you kind of justify why you're spending so much money on equipment that you wanted to spend anyway. So, people who have a passion for it and who have time for it, it does take serious chunks of time. And when life steps in and gets in your way, as it did for many of us this past year, to varying degrees, the work does slow down. But we get back into it as we can. And since we do it at home, it is something we enjoy doing. Plus, we get to see all these fantastic photos of everyone across the country, and that's wonderful to see.
Pierre, do you want to answer Carol's question about what the ICG budget line for the archives is?
Well, basically and it's subdivided into a couple of different things. One of it is, of course, is to pay the necessary fees for our storage and other things, because we have expanded storage. It costs a little extra money there, which Leslie was paying for out of her own pocket, and that needed to stop. And, like Nora says, we're all willing to punch in a lot of our own money for a lot of this, but we can't fund the whole thing. So that's pays for part of it. It pays for replacement of equipment. Electronic equipment wears out or becomes obsolete, and we need to stand up to the next usage, so we get have the best equipment we possibly can have. Sometimes some of it is spent to obtain collections. There are people that will say, "Oh, well, I'll sell you my collection," or a convention will sell photos, and yes, sometimes you can talk the photographer into just donating them for ICG, since it's sort of a charitable archival thing, but sometimes you can't. And the photographers have to break even as well. And so they will charge us for the images, whether they're electronic or especially if they are physical media, either slides or actual printed photographs, because those cost money for those photographers to produce. And so they want to be reimbursed for that, and it's completely understandable. So that's what that money is used for. Again, sometimes we'll contribute our own things for an immediate stuff thing, and we don't charge the ICG for it because it's us and we have a passion for it. But there are legitimate expenses throughout the year that the archives needs to deal with. As Bruce mentioned, some of the hard drives and things like that start to age and become unreliable. They need to be replaced. Physical media like DVDs often need to be replaced because they will rot, and they need to be set up to a new set of discs on occasion. So these are a constant set of expenses that the archives has to expend to be able to keep going, to stay in business. And so that's what the budget item is. Like I said, it's broken down into different things, but that's what it's for, and that's what we spend it on.
Yeah, Nora just said we do have
Oh,
third-party
yes.
scanning services.
Yeah, Nora just
different
meant also
costs.
to pay for third-party scanning services. As she mentioned, when we get a really large collection from somebody and it's beyond the easy reach for Nora to scan it with her equipment, we'll need to bring it to a professional services and shipping things. A photographer ships us his physical albums, like Jack. We need to pay to ship them back, and sometimes pay for him to ship them to us, because that's a considerable cost. And so again, all those add up into what that budget goes for.
Have any other questions that we haven't addressed yet? Any questions about the YouTube channel or anything about what else we might have in the archives, or curiosity?
You suggested that we promote some of the things that we've most recently uploaded.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't think about that. We should mention that. You would know that.
Yes. Yeah, so been focused a lot on World Cons. So filling in World Cons. So World Cons 2000 to 2005, filling in between 2015 and 2020, and a couple of World Cons from the 1970s that the exhibits aren't in place yet, but they're in the system waiting to go. Plus adding in a few more things from the 60s.
Yeah, Carol just asked about Danny Lowe's photographer, and collection. I must admit, I had forgotten about Danny.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it.
I have as far as I know, I don't know if any of us have a contact information for him. So Carol, if you know how to get a hold of Danny, and if he's willing to donate what he has, we'd be delighted to get it.
We would be fairly willing, if anyone had a large collection from someone, to pay for the shipping to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
we
in our
are in
budget.
we are in conversation about a large collection in the Bay Area, but it's early days in the conversation, so we don't want to talk about any of the specifics. But if we got it, it would fill in a lot of the West Coast for us.
Yeah, we want the big collections. We want the small collections. If you're coming to a CC and you have room in your car, throw a box in the back of your car. If you're flying, let us know and we'll work out a shipping schedule for you. And if you have any questions about what we might want or what you might have, or if you're looking for something or any process, because I know when you're in a meeting like this, sometimes it can be difficult to think of the question and then 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I wish I'd asked this. Just email us again at the email address that was shown up in the chat, and we'll get to you. It does go to multiple people. It doesn't just go to one person. It goes, I know at least goes to Pierre and to Bruce. I'm not sure it comes to my email address, but that's okay. I can access Bruce's if I need to, and we will get you answers. Same with if you go through Facebook, you can send us messages through Facebook, and multiple people have access to that. So your questions will be answered. Even if we don't know the answer, we'll get back and say, we don't know, let's find out. It'll be great.
To reiterate that something Nora had said earlier, obviously our main concentration is on convention costuming. That's what I'm writing the history about. But we're always interested in things like, I always monitor what World of Wearable Art is doing. There's also the Jember fashion show in Indonesia, which is fabulous to watch. If there's somebody in New Orleans area who has the New Orleans Indians, we'd love to have stuff like, I mean, if anybody knows of anything like that where they're doing these creative things in costume, we would like to see it.
Ren fairs,
fairs,
LARPing events.
fashion
They've
shows,
got great ones in Europe that
furry
I've heard of.
cons,
Furry con.
steampunk.
Yep. You name it, we want it.
Yeah.
We're very acquisitive,
Yes.
as I say. So we want all your photos, and we will keep very good care of them, we promise. And we won't make silly memes out of them, I promise. Even though I love memes, I will not make memes out of your photos.
I think we've reached an end. Have we, Philip?
Great. Thanks a lot, guys, for the presentation. That gives us a really good idea about what the Archives is doing. The Archives is one of the really outstanding things about what the ICG is doing. The Archive is one of the premier features of membership in the ICG. So we want to thank you guys for doing this, spending all your time and your passion for making this happen. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have any of this. So thanks a lot. I wanted to remind people that at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey. If you could please fill it out, that would be very helpful. A video of this presentation today, the webinar today, will be on the Silicon Web website. And we'll send out an announcement when that is available to everyone who's registered for this webinar and out to the ICG list and wherever else we advertised it. And the Archives is certainly welcome to use this video in their outreach efforts as well, obviously. And that would be great as well. I wanted to talk about the next webinar. It's coming up December 10th. The title of the webinar is Reenactress: Discovering the Women Warriors of the Civil War. There were about 250 Civil War soldiers who were actually women disguised as men. It's a little vague because the history is incomplete due to the heroines' amazing ability to pull off their disguises. In her first full-length feature documentary, Reenactress, J.R. Hardman, who is the director, is exploring the history of women warriors who fought in the service of their countries on both the Confederate and the Union side. In this webinar, she's going to be talking about her work creating this documentary, Reenactress, and a little bit about the history of the women who fought in the Civil War as men. An announcement is already out for that. We'll be sending out reminders to a number of lists. But if you're interested in finding out about it and you haven't gotten it, please contact me at, and I'll put my email address in the chat window. But again, this is December 10th, 2023, Reenactress: Discovering the Women Warriors of the Civil War. I think this is going to be a fascinating talk. And JR is really passionate about what she's doing. And she's also a Civil War reenactor. And she's going to be talking about her experience and the other women who have had a lot of trouble integrating into the Civil War reenactment community. So please register for that. And we'll be announcing future webinars through email announcements, and also in the most recent issue that'll be coming out shortly of the Virtual Customer Magazine. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.